In this video, I want to share my thoughts and my kind of perspectives as to where I think the practice of Reiki is headed. I'm inspired to make this video because here we are on the 100th anniversary year of the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho. And, perhaps you've not seen me before, perhaps you've not been to RootsofLife.org to know that my background and my lineage is kind of anchored in the Japanese practice of Reiki as a healing modality. I'm 3 teachers removed from Usui Sensei, and I really honor and cherish the connection to those roots for reasons that I think I'll explore a little bit here as I answer that kind of question or share my thoughts as to where Reiki is headed, in my opinion. I'm seeing an increasing number of new lines of thought within Reiki, or splits or forks in the road, as it were, with the practice of energy healing or Reiki as an energy healing modality. And I think in many ways, this can be a good thing. I mean, it's helping to increase exposure of Reiki as a healing modality. It's helping to bring more people into the practice. It's helping to encourage people to explore themselves, to go into their own healing journey, right? And of course, here we are with a beautiful upwelling and swell and resurgence or interest in things like meditation and mindfulness and healing and relaxation and all of this. And so I think it's really beautiful that it allows a wider net to be cast, right? But one of the issues that I have here with this, and I'm saying this here in case maybe some of you are brand new to Reiki, or maybe you've just taken a class or a training, any split or fork in that road, right, from the roots of the practice of Reiki, is an opportunity for the individual who's creating that fork to interject their own beliefs or their own ego or their own personas into the practice of Reiki. And, again, maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not. But one thing that is certain is every time that there's a fork in the road, that clearly is established because the person creating that fork in the road believes that they have found out something better or more powerful or more direct or whatever it may be, right? Like their way is somehow better than the previous. That might be what people believe, and that's fine. But the question that I would urge everybody to consider here is, when we're looking at Reiki, Reiki is the energy of all things, right? It's the energy of literally everything in the universe. And so if that's the case, then how could there be a fork in the road? And further to that, how could that fork make somehow a practice to be more powerful or more direct when we're trying to connect into the energy of all things? See, to me, that doesn't really resonate, and it gives far too much space for ego or the belief of the teacher, or for kind of like a guru style practitioner to come into the fold or into the practice. And I think that brings me to my first point here, with at least where I see Reiki heading and as it's kind of evolving. With increasing forks in that road, I think more and more people are asking the questions or becoming aware of the points that I'm raising here. How is it that a new line of Reiki can be more powerful and more direct or more pure or whatever it may be? How can it have all of these kind of adjectives on top of it, or beliefs or grandiose claims or whatever attached to a certain line of Reiki? And further to that, how can some certain lines of Reiki claim to be related or descended from the original practices of Reiki, but then supersede or layer on top the beliefs of the founder of that certain branch? Now, I'm being very cautious here. I don't want to call out any branches. I'm not talking about any in particular. I'm just talking about all of the splits or the bifurcations in the lineages as they are at present with Reiki. So if Reiki, again, is the energy of all things, if we're turning into the energy of everything in the universe, then how is it that I could claim that the way that I teach is more powerful or more pure or more direct than the way other people are teaching? How could I improve on the teachings of turning into the energy of the universe? Quite often we hear this as connections via angels or connections via new symbols or things that have been channeled or divinely inspired to teachers or whatever. But I would urge each and every one of you to ask, how is that possibly true? Like, for instance, if I made a claim that the way that I teach Usui Reiki Ryoho is channeled directly from Usui Sensei, because he comes to me in my meditations and in my Reiki practices and so on, there's still another layer to that. There's still another step that I could take where I let go of the belief in myself, right? And if I let go of the belief in myself, then I would let go of any opportunity to make such claims. Because Usui Sensei and all of his teachings and all of the teachings that I bring forward and all of the teachings of Reiki as a healing modality all fall under the umbrella of universal energy. And so anybody making a claim that they can connect you quicker or deeper or stronger or more purely or whatever to any deity or belief or aspect under that umbrella is simply framing their approach via their own ego and their own belief. And so, if you've learned from a teacher who is making these claims, or if you've looked at it from this perspective, maybe you've read books on these perspectives and so on, the question that I would always ask is, can you go a step further? And that's what I'm asking a lot in my videos here on YouTube, inspiring, I hope, a deeper conversation of surrendering. And that, I think, is where, at least I hope, that's where the practice of Reiki is moving. Because with every fork in the road, with every branch, with every new teacher who comes along and so on, who are bringing these type of questions to the surface, I think the students who have learned under kind of this language are recognizing that there is one more step, right? There's one more step that you can take, which is to let go of the teachers, let go of belief, let go of the practice of the lineage and so on, and surrender into the self. See, for instance, I can't heal myself if my belief is constantly associated to Usui Sensei or to my teachers. I have to go into myself. If I believe my practice is being channeled from Jesus or from the Buddha or whatever it may be, then I'm always looking external. I'm never looking internal. If I believe that I'm learning from a teacher who is making such claims, then I'm always looking external to the self as opposed to looking internal to the self. And until we look inside, we can't heal. Nothing external will heal because the external is simply a mirror of your internal space. And until you go in, that mirror will always be clouded with belief, with ego, with doubt, with fear, with trauma, and so on. And I really do feel like that's where we are. There's been so many people who have learned these first steps of, connecting to Reiki as a healing modality, connecting to it as a practice, and so on. But they're coming up against perhaps that realization of the internal versus the external. And I do see a need or a demand or a want for Reiki to be taught as a selfless practice, as a practice of turning into the self and letting go of the belief of me, of you, of Reiki, of Usui Sensei, of whoever it may be. Until we do that, then I don't think we can fully understand or explore the beautiful practice and the simplicity of what Reiki is, turning inward to the self, right? And this, to me, inspires belief in ourself. And what I mean by that, because belief can be a daunting space, right? Especially belief in the self. If we're carrying so much trauma and doubt and worry and suffering and so on, we might not want to look inward. And that makes total sense. But as we start to finally turn a cautious eye or a hesitant eye inside, as we start to leave the world of guru teachers and belief and external and bring that vision internal, then we start to find a stronger belief in ourselves or a deeper connection to ourselves. And we start to recognize that the only way forward is inward, right? And with more gaze cast inside, then we can heal quicker, because that's the only place healing can exist. And so while I'm still seeing a lot of new lineages come up, I would say in my work with Reiki, I probably hear of a new line of Reiki once a month at least. People ask me all the time, hey, Bruce, what do you think about, this line of Reiki? I've just heard about it. Can you give me some ideas on it and so on? And I give them the same kind of idea here that I'm presenting in the video. And that's why it's one of the reasons for me making this video, is to ask these very questions of that new practice that is just coming forward. Is it helping you look inside, or is it putting your belief or your faith outside, right? And so as we learn to move inward, and as we learn to recognize that Reiki is that internal practice, I think we're coming home. I think we're finding a truer meaning of what Reiki is. Reiki is not Usui Sensei. It's not me. It's not my teacher. It's not any of your teachers. It's not any gods or beliefs or deities. It's not any symbols. It's not any hand placements, because all of those together are Reiki. And so when we start to isolate one of those things, we start to step away from the bigger picture of this as a healing modality and as a journey inward, right? And when we start to take that journey, this is another aspect of where I think we're moving, at least I hope anyways, with the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, or with Reiki in general, is that we are starting to see teachers come forward that help you discover yourself. Not discover it through their lens, not discover it through what they think they've channeled or their beliefs or so on and so forth, but turning inward, turning into the self. Fundamentally, that's why, if I had to say a line of Reiki that I practice, that's why I practice Usui Reiki Ryoho. Because at its core, and as the way I was taught it in Japan, it's a journey inward with teachers who will support you, not from their ego, but from your journey, right? Help guide you on that journey with hopeful neutrality and support. At least that's how it's been taught to me. And I think it's so valuable to hold that space for others. And so finding that support on your journey inward, that's what I do. That's what I teach, to help you understand the path inside the self. Not from my belief, not from my expectations, not from my experience necessarily, because all of those things are framed within myself, right? They're framed with my experience on my own healing journey, on my journey inward, right? So rather, my teachings are a way to help constantly surrender, constantly turn inward, understand how Reiki is not an external practice, but an internal practice, as the way it's originally taught, before it was diluted and modified and adjusted by all of the different branches and lineages that are currently out there. If we recognize that it's an internal practice of surrender and non-duality, then we can start to finally have a discussion about Reiki at its roots. That's where I think and feel, or hopefully believe, Reiki is headed. That's how I teach Reiki. It's my honor to bring that understanding of Reiki to the world. It's my honor to bring that to my students. And the honor is in the discovery of the self. Because when we turn inward, we recognize that the only thing that was there to discover is our true self, our true nature. And until we look in, we can't find it. You can't find it external. You can only find it internally. So I think that that's where the world of Reiki is going, where we're starting to move away from all of these other lineages and branches and teachers and so on, and recognize it as an internal practice. I think that the belief in the external has been around long enough that a lot of people are recognizing that any external belief is ultimately a dead end. At some point, you can only take that so far because it demands that you look inside. That's how I teach. That's how I guide my students. That's how I guide my practice. And it's an honor. It's an honor to walk with each and every one that I work with into that journey, into that space of discovering the self. Endless support, neutral support, non-dualistic support, but support. Support on the journey inward. Because for everybody at some point in our lives, that journey inward is a foreign one. We have to take our first steps. And those can be some pretty daunting steps indeed. So if this resonates with you, if it's raised some interesting points about perhaps how you've learned Reiki, or how you would like your understanding of yourself and your own internal Reiki practice to evolve, reach out to me. Head on over to RootsofLife.org. You can see my backstory, my Reiki lineage, and the reasoning behind this video in how I teach Reiki as a practice of internal surrendering. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I hope you've enjoyed. To everybody, as always, be well and In Gassho.